Hello and welcome to the video by TrumpExcel. I'm Sumit Bansal, and in this video I will show you different options you have when you want to refresh your data, your queries, your connections when working with Power Query. So here I have this query, and this is the output of this query here, which is sales data. And in this query, what I've done is I've connected it to a folder, and in that folder, I simply combine all the files, all the Excel files and the data in those files. So I have a folder, I have 4 files in it: East data, West data, North data, South data, and I use Power Query to combine this data into this query. And I have covered this in one of the videos in this course. Now with this data, I have also created this pivot table here. Now, if I have to refresh this data, let's say in the back end, the folder has a new file or the existing file gets updated, and I have to refresh this data, there are a couple of options for me to do this. I can right click and go to the refresh option here. When I do this, it would refresh this query. I can come here on this query and I can click on refresh here, or I can go to the data tab and I can click on refresh all. Also note that when you refresh a query, it doesn't refresh the pivot table. So if I refresh this query and I have this connected to the pivot table, I would have to come and refresh the pivot table again separately. So these are two different things. These are not connected when it comes to refreshing the data. Now, this is the manual way of doing it, but there are more ways of refreshing data in Power Query. And you can get access to those refresh options if you right click on the query and you go to the properties option for that query. So these are all the refresh options. You see, I have this query properties dialog box and I have these refresh control options, and these are all the options for this query. Now, the first option here is enable background refresh. This means that when the refresh is happening, it would happen in the background, which means that I would be able to work in the workbook, or I can continue to work in this workbook, change cells and do whatever I want to while the refresh is in progress. Now, Power Query refresh doesn't really take a lot of time, but if you have very heavy data, if you are getting data from many web pages or you are connecting it to a database, then it may take a few seconds. And in that period of time, you would be able to work on the workbook. If you do not have this option checked, then you would be logged out. And by the time Power Query is done with refreshing, you would not be able to make any changes. So I advise you keep this option checked. The second one is refresh every specified amount of minutes. So if I check this option, I can specify that I want to refresh my query after every 1 minute, or after every 30 minutes, or after every 2 hours. So in this case, I can specify the number of minutes. I can use a value between 1 and somewhere around 32,700. So that is the range that you can use. I'm not really sure about the upper limit of the range, but it is close to 32,727 if I'm not wrong. And in this case, it would always be a positive integer, so you cannot use something negative. And this is useful if you are working with data that is, let's say, stock market data, and you are fetching the stock market data, or you are fetching any other kind of data that gets refreshed in real time. Now, there is the third option, which is refresh data when opening the file. And this is quite self-explanatory. When you open a file, it would immediately refresh your query. So when you open the file, this query would be refreshed. But then there is another option which says remove data from the external data range before saving the workbook. This means that when you save the workbook, this data would be gone. This would be empty. And when you reopen it, it would refresh this query, and this query would then put the data back in the table. Now, the reason Microsoft team has done this is that, let's say this is a shared workbook on a network drive, and if you do not have the right credentials, or if you do not have the right privacy settings, and you close the workbook, this table goes away. And when you reopen it, and if you do not have the right privacy settings or the credentials, you would not see this data, because this query would not be able to refresh itself. So this is more like a security thing. Now, these are the options that are given by the properties option in each query. But then you can also use VBA to refresh your queries. So let me move to another file here, and how to do this with VBA I would show you in this data set. This is the file that we created in one of the videos when we talked about the M language. So this video is in the section that talks about M language. And what we have done here is we have this data set, this sales data for all these items, and I have created this drop down here. And when you select something and you go here and you refresh this table, it would instantly give me all the records for this selected item. So it's extracting the data from this main table and putting it here in this filtered table. So you can see that I have this here, but whenever a user selects something, he or she would have to come here and refresh this again and again every time. And if you want to make this more user friendly, then you can give user the option to refresh it automatically, maybe by using a button. So the user can select this, click on a button, it becomes more intuitive, and it also refreshes this. So let's see how to do this. The first thing that I would do is I would record a macro and show you what the code would be when I refresh this query here. So let me first go to the data tab and click on queries connections. And these are the queries that are there in this workbook. And this is the data 1 and 2 in bracket is the query which refers to this data set. Now let me first rename this query because this is not very descriptive. So let's call this filtered data. And now what I'm going to do is using VBA, I am going to filter this, refresh this data. So I would go to the developer tab here and I would click on the record macro button. If you do not see the developer tab, simply right click on any of these tabs, go to customize the ribbon, and in the Excel options dialog box, make sure that this developer option is checked and click OK, and this would show up. Now, when I click on record macro, it'll ask me the name of the macro. Let me type anything. Let me say filter data refresh. You can give any name you want. And now when I click OK, it has started recording the macro. You can see it says stop recording, which is an indication that it's recording now. And I would come here, I would right click on this and I would click on refresh. So it's refreshing the data, and I would go back and I would stop the macro. Now let me close this and let me now go to the developer tab and click on Visual Basic. So when I do this, it'll open the VB editor. So when I click on this, it opens the VB editor here, and I have both these objects, both these workbooks open. This is the one that is open right now, which is updating query based on selection. And in module, I have the code that is recorded. And you can see it's a small, simple code, one-line code. These lines here, which follows an apostrophe, are comments. So you can easily delete these. And here, this is a one single line code which says active workbook.connections. And then in double quotes, I have query dash filtered data, and filtered data is the name of the query, and this is a prefix that you need to apply to any query that you want to refresh using VBA. And then you have dot refresh here. Now this is the single line of code that is refreshing this query, and I'm going to copy this code here, and I'm going to put this code here in one of the notepad just for future use. Now this macro is recorded. My intent here is to insert a button so that I can click on the button and refresh this query. So to do that, I would go to insert. Here I can insert a shape. So let me insert a shape here. Let it be this one. You can give it any color or anything. You can format it just like any other shape, and you can type anything in it. So let me type. Let me right click, go to oops. Okay, there is something wrong. Let me delete this one. All right, now when I click on edit text, I can refresh, type refresh in this, which is the text that I want to appear in this case. I would make this bold. I can center align this. If I want, I can increase the font. So you can make this look like a button and see what happens. Now, when I come here and click on assign macro, so I right click on the shape and I click on assign macro, I can assign the macro that I have recorded. So I click on filter data refresh, which is the name of the macro, and I click on OK. So now this has a macro in it, and you can see now when I hover my mouse over it, it shows me this clickable icon. And now when I change this here, so let me select office chair, and now when I click on refresh, it would instantly refresh my data. Similarly, if I come here and I change this to projector and I click on refresh, it would instantly refresh the data. So this is how you can assign a macro to a button so that you can refresh the data using a button. But then there is another thing that you can do, and it's even better, which is if a user makes a change here. So if a user selects, let's say, office chair, the user doesn't even have to click on the button. As soon as the change is made, VBA would identify this and refresh this query, and that would be awesome because this makes it more dynamic. So let me show you how to do this, and that is why we have this code here. So what I'm going to do is go back to developer tab and open the VB editor. And in this case, the code would go in the sheet module. So in the sheet code window. So this is data 1. So I would double click on this sheet 2 here because this says data 1. And when I double click on it, I get this code window. I would select worksheet here and I would change this to here and select change. And let me delete this part here. What this is doing is it is saying if there is any change in the worksheet, then this code would be run or assessed, at least this code would be read by VBA, and if there are any lines that can be executed, it would be done. So in this case, the cell that is changed, it gets the name target. So what I can check here is if target dot address is equal to, and here my column is I2, so I would say $I $2, which is the address of this. If this is the case, then refresh this query, else, and if, and this is the same line of code that I copied. And what happens in this case is it would first check the change. So whenever I make any change in the worksheet, it gets recorded, but only if this condition is met, then the query gets refreshed, else nothing happens. So in this case, I say if target.address is equal to I2, then refresh this query, else do nothing. And see what happens when I come here and I refresh this and make this whiteboard, it instantly updates. Similarly, if I come here and I change this to dairy, it instantly updates. So this is even better than creating a button because now you have made it truly dynamic. Another thing that I want to show you is that in case you want to refresh everything, refresh all, then you can go to the module and you can again use a VBA code. So let me make this, or let's call this refresh all. And in this case, what you can do is you can use something like this workbook dot refresh all, and when you run this code, everything would be refreshed. So in this case, let me delete this part to show you that this works, so that this selection VBA is gone. Now when I select whiteboard, oh sorry, I need to press Alt and F. I need to delete it from this sheet here. So let me delete this code here. And now when I make a change here, it doesn't get refreshed, but when I run this code, you can see it refreshes and it updates the data. So if you want to refresh everything, including all the connections, then you can use this code, this workbook dot refresh all. So this is how you can refresh your queries, your connections with VBA. You can specify the query name and then you can refresh that specific query, or you can use refresh all to refresh all the queries and pivot tables at one go. That's it in this video. I hope you found this useful. Thank you and have a nice day.